In 2005, an 18-year-old version of the teacher you see before you was heartbroken. My high school lacrosse team, the Fighting Aardvarks of Oregon Episcopal School, yes, that was our real mascot, had advanced to the state championship game, but after a hard-fought contest, we had lost. I went home completely dejected. But later that day, something happened that changed everything. I got a notification that I could finally join Facebook. I got my college email account, and that meant that I could start a profile, I could start connecting with people I'd be going to school with later in the year. A real-world disappointment melted in the face of the warm embrace of the digital world. Now, this is a long way of saying that I'm a millennial. I grew up with the internet, but I only came to have it in my pocket and always available a little bit later in life. But I also work with teenagers, and teenagers have never not had this technology, never not had this option to escape at a moment's notice if they feel like it. And sometimes I think, what is this having an effect on our brains? Now, our title of the talk. To bring ourselves to the title of the talk, are smartphones ruining us forever? Probably not. People have been angry at things that teenagers have been doing that are new ever since teenagers have been a thing. I think of it like a grumpy man yelling at kids and telling them to get off his lawn. Before smartphones, it was the internet. Before the internet, it was TV. Before TV, it was comic books. So this talk isn't going to be about that. But, and there is a but, we're all dealing in a new environment, where we all have these devices that connect us with each other available at all times. And sometimes I wonder what the long-term effects of this are going to be, okay? So at the end of this talk, my hope is that we'll have thought a little bit more deeply about what effects this technology is going to have on us and how we use it in our day-to-day lives. So I want you to imagine a scary scenario. Imagine that last night while you were asleep, a mad scientist sneaks into your room and implants a small chip just behind your ear, okay? You wake up and nothing, it seems like nothing has changed, but something really fundamental about your brain is different. You see, this isn't just any mad scientist. He's an employee. He works for, let's say, the Scheinhardt Family Sausage Company. And every time you catch a glimpse of a delicious Scheinhardt Family sausage, you start to feel good, really good. You wake up, you go to the refrigerator, you see the packaging, and before you even know it, you're opening the package, popping it in the microwave, and at every step of the way, feeling like you're on the verge of something awesome. Now, this chip stimulates the dopamine center in your brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's something that is in your brain that does something very, very special. Now, in 1953, two scientists named Olds and Milner did something to rats that's like what we just talked about with the mad scientist and the sausages. What they did was they realized that if they zapped a specific part of a rat's brain with a small dose of electricity, they could get the rat to do pretty much anything they wanted. If it was moving to another side of the cage, the rat would do it. If it was pressing a button with its little rat claws, the rat would do it. If it was completely avoiding food, ultimately starving to death, the rat would do it. Now, they thought they had found the happiness center of the brain, but they hadn't. They'd found the reward center. Now that might seem like a small distinction, but when you hear about what happened when they started with human subjects, you're going to start to see how this can change the architecture of your brain. You see, dopamine is the chemical that leads you towards a goal. But when they started doing this with human subjects, I want you to imagine what it must have been like to be one of these test subjects. Imagine that the scientists put an electrode in your brain and give you a control panel with a button on it that allows you to self-stimulate this newly discovered reward center, this dopamine center. How often do you think you would press that button? A couple times a day? a couple times an hour, a couple times a minute. On average, test subjects pressed that button once every second. They pressed it over and over and over, furiously, even when the electricity to the box had completely cut off and it didn't do anything. But they didn't describe a sense of happiness. No, they described it more in terms of anxiety, exhaustion, fear of what might happen if this button was ever taken away. You see, dopamine isn't a happiness drug, it's a reward drug. It rewards you for taking action towards something, but you never quite get there. A dopamine high is the feeling that something great is just around the corner, but you're never quite there. Does that remind you of anything? Maybe scrolling through an image feed where 9 out of 10 of the posts you see are boring, you've seen them before, but you get that little flash of hope whenever the next cool thing might be there. I hear from a lot of people, I can't give up my smartphone. My smartphone makes me happy. I'm here to tell you that is unequivocally not the case. Your smartphone makes you think you are about to be happy, and that's an important difference. Okay? We now live in an environment that is completely different from the one that we evolved for. We spent the vast majority of our evolutionary history on the plains of Africa in small, tight-knit groups, hunting and gathering and looking for whatever food we could. Now, this crafted us for certain drives, right? We looked for food that was high fat, high sugar, because that's where most of the energy was. Whenever we saw tracks on the ground of some prey animal we were trying to hunt, our dopamine centers would light up because we knew we were on the path to getting that reward. Now, fast forward to today, and you have this kind of fast food, high fat, high sugar food available everywhere. And the rise in obesity and heart disease is the result. Something that used to be rare and valuable has become cheap and abundant. The same thing has happened with connection to the internet and social media. We evolved to crave things like connection with each other, novelty, outrage, because these things helped us survive long, long ago. And it's the same thing with social media. Now we have these feelings, or at least some temporary imitation of them, at the press of a button. In the same way that fast food companies compete to deliver to us the most dopamine-stimulating images of the most delicious-looking food, we have tech companies that are competing to try to stimulate our dopamine centers as much as they possibly can. This is an experiment, and we're just at the beginning of it, and we don't know what the ultimate effects are going to be. Now, remember the good news, that this generation probably isn't more messed up than any other generation that's come before. Here's the bad news. Teens today are in a rough spot mentally. Ever since 2012, when smartphones became more common than less common, anxiety has been going up. Depression has been going up. Rates of suicide going up. And the amount of time that you spend on in-screen interactions instead of face-to-face interactions has been going up too. The more time you spend with the screen, over an hour per day, the less happy you tend to be. Now, scientists can't prove that screen time directly causes these negative outcomes, but I'm willing to bet that there is a connection. Because we live in a world today where if you don't like what's in front of you, if you find it too boring, too stressful, or just not what you want to see, each of us, adults, students, teens, everyone, is 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 from escaping. And that's a problem, I think. Now, this might be a fluke. This rise in anxiety and depression and so on might have nothing to do with the fact that we have high-speed computers in our pockets that allow us at a moment's notice to escape the real world. But I'd be willing to bet that there's some kind of connection there. Now, what recommendation do I have? What is the takeaway from this? Basically, to everyone in the audience, adults, students, myself, because I'm guilty of this as well, here's what I would say. Don't be a dopamine rat. Slow down. When you get the urge to check a notification, scroll through an image feed, look for something new, take a break. Ask yourself, what am I looking for? Am I trying to escape? Am I chasing that dopamine high? Even though I know it's ultimately endless, it'll never stop. Think about what you feel in your body, in your brain, when you're scrolling through Snapchat or Instagram, or if you're old, Facebook. Thank you.